David Pocock, it's good to have you back with us on Stateline. It's quite hard to believe that it's been 3 years almost since you entered the Parliament on a promise of doing politics differently. I guess you've endeavoured to do that in your own personal conduct, but do you claim to have changed the way politics is conducted in the Parliament?
Good to be back, Greg. Thank you. It's been a huge 3 years. I think really had to hit the ground running, have learnt a lot, but I think I have done what I said I would do. I've been accessible and accountable to people in the ACT. I've had over 40 community meetings from town halls, mobile offices, round tables on legislation and issues, and ultimately voted on their behalf. And I think really at every opportunity stood up for the ACT on things that matter to us.
What do you rate as a defining achievement in the first term that ACT voters, you might argue, should recognise and now reward?
Take housing as an example. The Labor government have their Housing Australia's Future Fund. The crossbench negotiated with them to have a minimum of 1,200 houses in each jurisdiction built. I then negotiated with government to have the minimum $500 million spend indexed for the life of the fund. That's an extra $6.3 billion on social and affordable housing. So I think that's meaningful when it comes to housing in the Territory, given it's such a huge issue here. Another example, the Upper Murrumbidgee River has been starved of water for decades. I negotiated $55 million for restoration work, for more water when it gets dry, and negotiated to have the way that water is actually released from Snowy Hydro reviewed, and hopefully a far better arrangement put in place.
Okay, so looking ahead into a second term, I guess voters would be familiar with the things you've just mentioned there. Integrity and climate were core to your first pitch. What is it that you can achievably promise to deliver for a second?
We've seen some very good and welcome announcements from the Labor government on health, more investment in Medicare, but it doesn't work for the ACT. We need very specific solutions to ensure that seeing your GP is accessible and affordable for Canberrans.
What is it that should be done in addition to what the Albanese government has already promised to do?
There's some, I think, really key things that can happen. One is to have more of an incentive for longer consults. We know that people are presenting with more complex cases. Currently, you're penalised if you see a patient for longer than 6-8 minutes. That's not good enough. That should change. And then we need to change the way that Canberra is rated. The modified Monash model rates us as a metro area, and if you look at our doctors per population, if you look at our bulk billing rates, our gap fees, we're nothing like metro areas, and so we need to change that from a 1 to a 2. A little bit technical, but that will really help doctors bulk bill.
In what way would you apply that leverage if re-elected? Would you withhold your support for other health initiatives that are still to be legislated? Will you play harder ball with a potentially returned Albanese government?
I'll push at every opportunity. I've been raising this at estimates. I've raised this with the Health Minister.
Let's flip the scenario around. A Dutton government is elected. Public service job cuts will clearly be an overarching concern for you. What is the strongest action you'd be prepared to take against a Dutton government moving down this path?
I think cutting the public service is not something that they'll have to legislate. And if it is 41,000 Canberra public servants, that will decimate our economy. We'll be straight into recession, and it will be a massive hit to small businesses across the Territory. So I'm obviously going to push hard against that. On Peter Dutton's other policies, I think we're seeing a real lack of detail as to exactly what they would do. Something like his gas reservation policy, I think, is actually a good idea, and I'm really keen to see more detail about what that looks like for Australians.
Let's talk about the way you conduct your campaign over the weeks ahead. You took the second seat on preferences from others last time to be elected. Is it important to you to beat Katy Gallagher into the #1 position?
I don't care who gets a quota first. I mean, that's not even something I'm thinking about. It's been a huge privilege to represent Canberrans. I think there's still so much to do and would love to continue to do that. And I'll stand on my record as a senator for the ACT. I'm running a far leaner campaign this time, and we'll see what Canberrans think.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Finances are critical, as are volunteers. I was going to observe, but you've kind of confirmed it already, that although it's early days, I see less signage for David Pocock this time around. How much reduced are your resources in volunteers and in dollars?
It's a much leaner campaign. As I said, I want to stand on my record. As an incumbent senator, I think there's huge advantages, and this is one of the arguments I've made against the major parties stitching up electoral reform, where it'll be much harder for independents at the next election.
So would you be under the caps, which I know do not apply to this election? Just how lean are you compared to what's been legislated for the next election?
At this stage, I would be. I've had over 1,000 people contribute to my campaign in the last 6 months. I think there's a real excitement about what independence can do for our democracy and what a minority government could actually mean for Australia, where we finally start to deal with some of the root causes of the big issues we face and force the major parties to actually put Australians first, put Australians before self-interest and vested interests.
David Pocock, look forward to talking again soon.
Thank you, Greg. Cheers.